What's up, Falcons Nation? It's your boy Jew coming at you guys with another episode of What's the Word Dirty Bird here on Jew Talk Sports, Atlanta Falcons Nation. We come every Wednesday, or we do this every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I really appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning in. We're going to talk about Arthur Smith tonight, and we're also going to, as always, get into the shout outs before we do anything. I'm going to pull this up here. We're going to get into some quick Atlanta Falcons news in a minute as well. The wife in the chat already. That's the wife Teacher Red. She said, what's the word, Dirty Bird? Joseph Thornton, what's going on, man? I'm in here fooling with the lighting. Anthony Evans, what's going on, man? I hope everybody had a great day. Hope you guys are enjoying y'all Wednesday. It is hump day, the middle of the week. So what's up to you guys? Oh, give me 1 second. Juan Carter, what's happening? I appreciate y'all joining me tonight. As always, y'all bear with me. I'm in here fooling with this camera. And you guys, let me know how the audio sound. I got a new mic. What's going on? Autry Oaks, what's going on, man? Yeah, you guys, please share. The wife just put that out. Y'all, please share this out on whether it's on Facebook, whether you're viewing it on Twitter. Definitely share this out, please. We appreciate it. Also, please hit that like, share, subscribe button if you haven't already done so. I really appreciate you guys. And like I said, tell a family member, tell a friend about the show. I really enjoy doing this every Wednesday night with you guys. Shout out to Reese 803. He said, what it do, Jew? Yeah, man. Bad work day? Oh, man. Well, I definitely hope that this the show tonight can lift your spirits. I'm sorry that you had a bad work day, man. Alex Edwards, audio is good. I'll bet. Yeah, this is a new mic. So this is my first time actually. I just broke it out the box yesterday. So I appreciate you guys. Let me know that the audio is good. Tony Wright, what's going on, Jew? Your audio loud and clear. Okay, that's what I like to hear. Dre Murphy. He said, how the family doing? Oh, we doing good on this Wednesday, man. I had to work today, and the family's good, man. The wife on summer break, the kids on summer break. So my wife's a teacher, if you guys didn't know. So shout out to the wife. She's on summer break right now. Devon, what's going on, man? We got Big Mike in the chat. What's going on, Big Mike? We got Miss Asia Green. What's going on, Asia? Yeah, she's one of our moderators. Shout out to Asia in the chat. But let's jump into some quick Atlanta Falcons news real quick. You guys, excuse me. I got to get used to this new setup here. Hold on. Let's get this pulled up here. Atlanta Falcons news. So Atlanta Falcons news, not a lot of news because as we know, mandatory mini camps and OTAs is over with, ended last week. So it's not a whole lot going on as far as Atlanta Falcons news. The guys are kind of on their little summer break before they have to report to training camp. But the only thing that broke today as far as news that I seen was they're going to be doing an open practice where the fans can go at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I think that's like August 7th, if I'm not mistaken, is what I seen. It's $5. Unfortunately, I don't live in the state of Georgia. I live in Florida, so I won't be able to go and attend the open practice. But I definitely think that that's something that really could be dope. If you're able to get out there and see go to a live practice, I definitely think that would be dope. to see the team up close and personal in the stadium and see how those guys are moving around. See how the coaching staff is, getting these guys prepared for the season. As you know, we will have a preseason this year. So I'm really looking forward to these preseason games, and I'm looking forward to this upcoming season. We're about, I'll say, a month and a half, something like that, a month and a half away from the preseason starting, and we're about, I'll say, almost a month, a little bit under a month away from training camp. So I'm really interested to see what this year is going to bring for this upcoming Atlanta Falcons squad, this 2021 season. Arthur Smith and this new regime, Terry Fontenot and these guys, I'm definitely excited to see what these guys are going to bring to the table. But that's pretty much all I have for Atlanta Falcons news. It's not a ton of news out there. Like I said, during this time, it's not a lot going on other than players getting signed. And we really recently haven't signed any guys this week, from my understanding. So definitely looking forward, though, to training camp once training camp kicks off late July, and definitely looking forward to this preseason, looking forward to these guys kicking off the season. But with that being said, we're going to jump into some more shout outs real quick before we get into the topic of the night. I see Sean Jones. What's going on, Sean? He always had I'll trade Matt Ryan for something. So what's up, man? He said, that's crazy. Our first preseason games against the Titans. How ironic is that? Yeah, that is crazy. I seen that. Everybody was talking about Julio Jones. I really doubt if Julio Jones plays in that preseason game, but it is ironic that our head coach, Arthur Smith, is going up against his former team in the first preseason game. So that is going to be kind of crazy. All right. And we got Michael Walker. What's going on? Yeah, it's your boy Jew, as I always say, on another fateful Wednesday night. We're going to jump into some things tonight. So let's jump into the topic, because I don't want to hold you guys too long tonight. I know tonight is the Eastern Conference Finals, Milwaukee Bucks against the hometown Atlanta Hawks. So I know a lot of you guys are going to be tuning into that at 8:30. So I promise you guys I'll be done before 8:30, so we all can tune in to game one of the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm looking forward to the game tonight as well. So that's why we're going to definitely be up here no more than an hour, 30 minutes. We'll be off before the Eastern Conference Finals kicks off this evening. And I also see Ultra Shadow jumped in as well. He said, I'm glad we only have 3 preseason games this year. That's how it should be. And I completely agree. I don't think that we should have overkill when it comes to the preseason games. You don't want to see anybody get injured or anything like that in the preseason. And I definitely completely agree with you on that. We don't want the overkill, especially now that we have a 17-game season and they expanded the playoffs. So I definitely agree with you on that. That we don't need any of the extra preseason games. But I do think that the preseason Ultra Shadow is necessary for guys that are trying to make the 53-man roster. Maybe somebody that was an undrafted player. I definitely think that could be huge for our Atlanta Falcons and for some of these guys that are trying to make the 53-man roster. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump right into the topic of the evening, and that's why Arthur Smith was a great head coach hire. I do love Arthur Smith and him being a guy that we brought in from Tennessee. He was a guy that was well sought after. I believe they said he had like 7 different teams wanted to interview him. He ended up turning down a couple of those interviews because the Falcons end up hiring him, and he ended up accepting the Atlanta Falcons job. But I love the hiring of a guy like Arthur Smith. If you guys have been tuning in to AFN, in the heavy hitters, that's me, K Styles, and Mad Mike on Tuesday nights during the season. We have our show that we do together. If you guys are tuning in on Monday nights to Kicking It with K Styles, which is every Monday night at 8 p.m., you guys definitely tune in and hit that like and subscribe button for Just K Styles on his channel, and also Mad Mike Sports. Just a little plugger there. But if you guys have been tuning in to our channels, or or have been watching the show last season, the Heavy Hitter show, I basically talked about when it was time for us to hire a new coach, that I wanted an offensive minded head coach. I didn't want necessarily a defensive minded head coach like a Rex Ryan. I didn't really want even like a guy like Dean Pease or the defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. I can't think of his name right now, but he was a name that was being thrown out there in AFN, and a lot of YouTubers were kind of throwing his name out there as well as a defensive minded head coach that the Falcons may go after. I was one of those guys that wanted an offensive minded head coach. I believe that Matt Ryan would benefit from having an offensive minded head coach. Matt Ryan has only played for defensive head coaches his entire NFL career. If you guys remember when he first came in, Mike Smith was a defensive minded coach or special teams. I believe he was a defensive minded coach, if I'm not mistaken. He came from the Baltimore Ravens, that 2000 Baltimore Ravens team. He was on that staff. He's actually the brother-in-law to Brian Billick, who was the head coach of that Baltimore Ravens team, ironically. But Mike Smith was here. He was the head coach for a while, which is a defensive-minded head coach. And then after him, we also had Dan Quinn, who was also a defensive-minded head coach. So this is the first time in Matt Ryan's career that he's going to have an offensive-minded head coach, which I think is going to really bode well for a guy like Matt Ryan. If you look at the way that the NFL is currently structured, if you look at the young coaches like Kyle Shanahan for the 49ers, if you look at the LA Rams coach Sean McVay, they've done a great job. If you look at Matt LaFleur, who's the Green Bay Packers head coach, those guys have done a great job as head coaches. And the reason I love offensive-minded head coaches, or I think that it's going to benefit our Atlanta Falcons, is because our Atlanta Falcons have never been the same since that 2016 season, as far as getting back to balance, getting back to having an explosive offense, and getting back to having a play caller that understands matchups and things of that nature. That's something that we really struggled with the last couple of seasons. And I definitely think that Arthur Smith being signed by our Falcons or hired as the head coach, I definitely think that this was a great signing, a great move by Arthur Blank. Rich McKay was a great hire. Even Terry Fontenot, he was a great hire as well. But I really think if you go back to that 2016 season, those coaches that I mentioned, Kyle Shanahan, who was here in 2016, helped us get to a Super Bowl. Matt LaFleur, who's the Green Bay head coach now, he actually was Matt Ryan's quarterbacks coach in that 2016 season. And we allowed both of those guys to slip through our fingers. We weren't able to retain any of those guys. I really think when Kyle Shanahan went to take that head coaching job with the 49ers in 2016 or that 2017 season, I really think that we should have tried to retain a guy like Matt LaFleur, because Matt LaFleur understands that Kyle Shanahan offense. He runs a similar West Coast scheme. And I really think that one of those guys, we should have definitely tried to retain a guy like Matt LaFleur. We've seen the success that he's had. He's been to 2 straight NFC Championship games in his first 2 years as a head coach with the Green Bay Packers. And I think a guy like Arthur Smith is going to have the same success as a guy like Kyle Shanahan, a guy like Matt LaFleur. I think one of the biggest things that goes unnoticed with that 2016 team under Dan Quinn was he did a great job of hiring that staff that he had. Those assistant coaches and those coordinators that we had in 2016 were great defensive coaches, great offensive coaches, guys like Kyle Shanahan, guys like Matt LaFleur, guys like Brian Cox, who was an ex-NFL player, ex-linebacker in the league. He was our defensive lines coach. He did a great job of coaching up guys like Rashid Hageman, Vic Beasley. They were great at doing their job, great at connecting with the guys in their room, whether it was the defensive line room, guys like Marquand Manuel, who was a secondaries coach. he was another guy that I think was really good in 2016 and 2017. And we lost a bunch of guys after that 2016 season. A lot of different guys left and were hired by other teams, whether they were hired as head coaches or whether they were hired as coordinators or assistant coaches with other teams. So I really think that really hurt Dan Quinn when he lost a lot of the guys that he brought in originally to be a part of his coaching staff. And I think that having a guy like Arthur Smith here, being that he's an offensive minded coach and he's going to be a guy that's going to call the plays on the offensive side of the ball, I really think that that's going to help a guy like Matt Ryan. He's not going to have to worry about another offensive coordinator being taken away or going to another team by getting another head coaching job. And I really think that it's a benefit to have a head coach that's also going to be the offensive coordinator or the play caller. Like I was saying before, if you look at most of the guys that are successful in the league, these coaches that are successful in the league now, that have great relationships with their quarterbacks, it's the Andy Reid's of the world with Pat Mahomes, which basically he calls the plays there in Kansas City. It's the guys like Matt LaFleur in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. He's calling the plays. Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco is calling the plays there. Sean McVay with the LA Rams. He's another guy that's a great offensive mind that's calling the plays. So I really think that that's going to bode well for a guy like Arthur Smith, and it's going to bode well for Matt Ryan, a guy who's had about 5 or 6 different offensive coordinators. He's not going to have to worry about his head coach, taking another job, or he's not going to have to worry about his coordinator not being there. And they're going to be able to build that continuity. He's going to have him around for probably the foreseeable future, depending on how well Arthur Smith does as the head coach. I could really see him being here, for an extended period of time if he does a great job coaching this team. Another guy that I didn't mention that's right here in the division that I wanted to mention was New Orleans Saints coach Sean Payton. If you guys remember, a lot of people give Drew Brees all of the credit when it comes to how successful he was. And personally, I think that Drew Brees was a great quarterback. Don't get me wrong. But if you remember when Drew Brees was in San Diego, he wasn't the Drew Brees that we've seen with the New Orleans Saints. He took his game to another level. And I really feel like the reason he was able to take his game to the next level was he had a great offensive play caller in Sean Payton that basically was calling the shots there. And they were able to link up, create that camaraderie, create that understanding between each other. And they were able to be together, over a decade. Sean Payton's been with the Saints for a very long time, and him and Drew Brees broke a ton of records. Drew Brees was able to shatter the passing yards record due to him having a great offensive coordinator or offensive coach. So I definitely think that a guy like Arthur Smith can possibly create those same ingredients that the Saints have over there with Sean Payton when they had Drew Brees. I believe the same thing with Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur, Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes. I really think that it's going to be important for Matt Ryan to create or develop that relationship with Arthur Smith. And Arthur Smith has already talked about in numerous media sessions or interviews that he's trying to develop a relationship with Matt Ryan. Those guys have to be on the same page. That's something we've seen the first season with Kyle Shanahan when he was here. Him and Matt Ryan kind of struggled that first year, but then in that second year, they were able to develop that chemistry. So I definitely think that that's something that Arthur Smith is going to be able to bring to our Atlanta Falcons. He's a great offensive play caller, great at understanding matchups. And I think that Terry Fontenot, him and Terry Fontenot are going to be a good pairing. Both of those guys have an understanding of building a roster together. And I really think when Dan Quinn was here with Thomas Dimitroff, there was a power struggle. Those guys were not on the same page. We had an offensive-minded GM, but we had a defensive-minded head coach. And I really feel like there was a power struggle between the two. So I definitely think that hiring Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith, they have that they're building that relationship, and these guys are willing to work together. Arthur Smith has said it numerous times that, neither one of them have all the answers, but they're coming together collectively. Even the coaching staff that he had put together. He talked about not wanting to have yes men, but to have guys that's going to bring different things to the table. That's going to tell him when, you know, they see something that he's doing that they think he can correct. I really feel like that was a huge problem with the last regime. We didn't see guys speaking out. You know, guys were hush hush. You didn't see coaches and things of that nature and players speaking out when we were doing the same things repetitively, like running the cover three or putting players in bad situations. We didn't see guys speaking out. So I definitely think that that's going to be something that's going to be critical for this new regime that Arthur Smith is developing. You know, this new regime here, him in the front office, Terry Fontenot, all of these guys that's a part of his coaching staff. I think it's going to be key for these guys. But I do want to jump in to the chat a little bit and see what you guys are saying as well. And you guys let me know what you think about the hire of Arthur Smith. Do you think Arthur Smith is going to be able to lead this team? Do you think that Arthur Smith is going to be a great head coach? Personally, I think he's going to be a great offensive coordinator, a great head coach, a guy who's already come in and is holding these guys accountable. But you guys let me know what you think about Arthur Smith. Do you think Arthur Smith was the right hiring for our Atlanta Falcons? Personally, like I said, I definitely think that he's going to be or have the success of the guys, these young coaches that are up and coming, the Matt LaFleur's, the Sean McVays, these young guys that are up and coming, these offensive play callers, great offensive mind, great football minds. I definitely think that Arthur Smith, in my book, to me, Arthur Smith already, personally, I believe he's already a top 5 play caller in the game. If you look at Tennessee, the Tennessee Titans numbers over the last couple seasons, they have been in the top 5 in red zone efficiency and things of that nature. So I definitely think that Arthur Smith is one of those guys that's going to be able to get this team, you know, going in the right direction, bringing that running game back to where it needs to be, bringing that offensive line along and getting these guys to gel up front, because that's some of the problems that we've had over the last couple of years is been with the offensive line not being able to gel together, and also the running game, you know, struggling to run the football. Let's see here. And I'm going to scroll up a little bit here because I know I probably missed a ton of you guys' comments. Let's see. Tony Wright says, true that, Jew, and running backs coach Bobby Turner is the best running backs coach in the NFL. Yeah, Bobby Turner is one of those guys that we had in 2016 as well. And he was with the Falcons for a couple seasons. He was one of those guys. I completely agree with you, Tony, that was one of the better position coaches in the game, is one of the best in the game at that running back spot. As far as the running back coaches, let's see here. Michael Walker says Shanahan took the running backs coach to Frisco. Yeah, he did take the running backs coach with him, but you see the success that they've had there with the 49ers. They have had great success. That's not just because of Bobby Turner. Kyle Shanahan is a brilliant offensive mind when it comes to the running game. And he's cut from his dad's cloth. Kyle Shanahan, Mike Shanahan, his father, who was a longtime head coach in the league, coached the Washington football team. Back then, they were known as the Redskins when he was coaching RG3. Also, when he was coaching Terrell Davis, Shannon Sharp, and those guys with the Denver Broncos. So I definitely can agree. We got my boy in the building, Just K Styles. Y'all make sure y'all go over and show him some love. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on his channel. He said, Juju to the bank. Let's see here. Look, I'm trying to see what else I missed here. I agree with that, Tony Wright. He says, I like Arthur Smith's philosophy to football. I do too. I love coaches that love the ground and pound. I love coaches that understand the game of football, that when you run the football, you make those guys, when you're running the football with success, you make the team bring extra guys in the box to stop the run. And that's what opens up the pass. And it goes both hand in hand. You can, if you want to get those corners to back off a little bit, throw the ball deep. Throw the ball deep a couple times and get those guys to back off. But I think Arthur Smith is a great offensive mind. He's going to be great at getting these guys all of the guys that we have on this team involved. If you see the guys that we brought in on the running backs, in the running back by committee, Mike Davis, who we brought over from Carolina, is a one-cut running back, north and south, kind of like a Derrick Henry style, physical. Quadri Olison, who we've had, and they say he had a pretty good mini camp and OTAs as far as being another one-cut back. And then bringing in a guy like Javion Hawkins, who I think is going to be great at catching the ball out of the backfield and a great change of pace back. Let's see here. J Black 142 says, Coach Arthur Smith is a great play caller who will help our offensive line improve the run by knowing how to call plays to protect them and put them in position to achieve. I think he meant to say succeed, but yeah, I definitely agree with you, J Black 142. I definitely think that a guy like Arthur Smith is going to do a great job, being that he's a former offensive lineman when he played at the University of North Carolina, and then he did a great job. Everywhere he's been, he's actually done a great job. Originally, he started with the Washington Redskins. As you know, his father owns FedEx, so he started there with the Redskins. He worked his way up, and then he got a job with the Tennessee Titans. He was a positions coach for a while, and then he was elevated by Mike Vrabel, who was a great defensive player with the New England Patriots, who was the head coach of the Tennessee Titans. He elevated Arthur Smith to the head coach position. So I definitely think that he's going to be able to establish that physical style football here in Atlanta. We're going to bring that physical style back, like the 98 team with Jamal Anderson and those guys, like the Michael Turners of the world that we had in the 2010s when Matt Ryan originally came into the league and was drafted. We had a great offensive line and a great running game. We had guys like Mud Duck, Tyler, who was the most underrated centers of all time. You had guys like Harvey Dahl, who was a guard, really nasty offensive lineman. We had those guys, and we basically was able to run the ball with great success in those seasons. And that's the reason we've seen Matt Ryan have the success he had early on in his career and was able to continue that. But coming into the league, Matt Ryan had that offensive line and that running game to kind of fall back on until he developed. So I definitely think that he's going to improve our offensive line, the run schemes that he's going to create, that outside zone running scheme. I definitely think that that's going to be something that we're going to see this year a lot. Also, a guy like Terry Fontenot, he deserves some credit as well. I had someone on Twitter basically say he hoped that I was going to talk about Terry Fontenot and talk about Dean Pease. I'm also going to talk about those guys a little bit as well. I think Terry Fontenot did a great job in the draft, and that's why I say that you can tell these guys are working hand in hand. In the draft, they went out and got a guy like Jalen Mayfield, who out of Michigan is used to playing in inclement weather, cold weather, used to playing physical football in the Big Ten, where Michigan Wolverines are known as a team that likes to run the football. And in the Big Ten, teams are known for playing defense and running the football. Teams like Iowa, teams like Wisconsin, those teams are physical up front. They usually have great offensive lines. And I definitely great offensive lines and great defenses. So I definitely think the trench warfare, they did a good job, Terry Fontenot, in building a fortress up front. I think he did a good job of bringing in a guy like Drew Dahlman, who can compete with a guy like Matt Hennessy that we have from last year. That was a rookie. I think they did a good job of trying to solidify that offensive line. They brought in a lot of guys and free agents through the free agency on one-year deals. So I definitely think that Terry Fontenot as well was a great hire. And then if you guys have been tuning in, like I said, to AFN, I talked about in our shows, our heavy hitter shows, I talked about if we got an offensive mind, a young offensive coach, that I wanted a veteran defensive mind or a veteran defensive coach. And I think Arthur Smith did a good job of putting together a veteran staff. Because he's a first-time head coach, I think he did a great job of bringing in veteran assistant coaches and coordinators. If you look at the guys, Frank Bush, the linebackers coach, if you look at the cornerbacks coach, we got a lot of guys that have been around a very long time in this league. But Dean Pease is one of the oldest guys in the league. He's one of the veterans around, veterans in the game. Dean Pease have never been fired from a job, have worked for the likes of Bill Belichick, has worked with the Baltimore Ravens in that organization. And we know that the Baltimore Ravens and the New England Patriots are known for having great defenses and having great running games. So I definitely think that a guy like Terry Fontenot also coming over from the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints are known for being great in the trenches. They have a great defensive line over there in New Orleans. They've had a great defensive line for years. And they also have had great offensive lines protecting Drew Brees. So I definitely think that the guys that they hired, as far as Arthur Blank and Rich McKay, these guys that they hired, I think they did a great job of doing their research and going in and bringing in guys that understood what the Falcons' weaknesses were. Because if you guys go back to that initial press conference before we hired Arthur Smith and before we hired a guy like Terry Fontenot, Arthur Blank talked about the biggest weakness of our team was the running game over the last couple of years. So we brought in one of the best offensive minds at creating run schemes. If you go look at the Tennessee Titans, and I talk about it all the time, prior to a guy like Arthur Smith taking over there, Derrick Henry wasn't really on the map yet. He was one of those guys that was second string running back behind DeMarco Murray. It wasn't until Arthur Smith came on the scene that Derrick Henry started to break these records last year, rushing for over 2,000 yards and being an offensive player of the year. Before Arthur Smith, was the offensive coordinator there in Tennessee, he was just a change of pace back, basically. Derrick Henry was one of those guys that was a part of a running back by committee. And when Arthur Smith was able to take over as that offensive coordinator, he was able to make Derrick Henry that bell cow that he was, and he was able to develop that offensive line there in Tennessee. So I expect him to do the exact same thing here in Atlanta. Also, I think that something that's underrated that a lot of people are not looking at is Arthur Smith's ability to coach the quarterback position. Like, yeah, he did bring in a guy like Dave Ragone, who's worked with quarterbacks as well, and is a guy who's going to assist him on the offensive side of things. But I think that Arthur Smith is one of those guys that's a quarterback whisperer, kind of like Andy Reid. I'm not going to put him on the same level as Andy Reid because there is levels to this. Andy Reid, to me, is probably the brightest offensive mind in the league because he's been around the game for almost 20 years now, if not 20 years already. But I do think that Arthur Smith is one of those guys that's one of these young pups up and coming in the game that's going to be one of those guys for years to come, kind of like an Andy Reid, kind of like a Kyle Shanahan or a Sean McVay. So I definitely, like I said, love the hiring of Arthur Smith. I definitely think that he's going to do a great job here in Atlanta. I expect him to do big things. And definitely, I made a bold prediction. It's been about maybe a month now on Twitter. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can follow me at Jew Talk Sports on Twitter. And I basically stated that I expect this Atlanta Falcons team to make the playoffs in year one. I basically guaranteed it, barring injury. As you know, this is the game of football. We never know, if injuries do happen. So if Matt Ryan, God forbid, goes down, knock on wood, maybe my prediction, won't hold true. But as long as Matt Ryan is upright and, we don't have a ton of injuries on this team, I expect this team to get to the playoffs. Now, I don't believe that a guy like Arthur Smith is required to make the playoffs because I've been hearing a couple content creators stating that Arthur Smith needs to make the playoffs in year one because they came in stating, him and Terry Fontenot came in stating that we were in win now mode. Even though we're in win now mode, I do think that the leash for Arthur Smith right now is really long. You don't put that type of pressure on a coach in year one to make the playoffs. I believe if he can get anywhere between, I'll say 6 and 7 wins, because we only won 4 games last year, that's an improvement. Now, I expect this team to make the playoffs and win about 10 to 11 games this season. But if he doesn't, I still don't believe that, we're going to hold his feet to the fire or he's going to be criticized if we see improvement. Now, if this team takes a huge step back, meaning we win 4 games again or we win less than 4 games, then I can see Arthur Smith getting criticism. But other than that, I really don't see I don't see him getting a lot of criticism if they don't make the playoffs this season. I really think that he has a pretty long leash at this point. I think you give the coach at least the first year to develop, his scheme and allow him to bring in and draft the type of players that he needs, be able to bring in guys in free agency to fit his scheme. If you see this past season, we really didn't have a chance in this offseason to bring in any veteran type or big splash, free agents, guys that can come in and play in this system. We basically had to go with 1 year guys because the cap situation was horrible. So I definitely think that you got to give Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot a little bit of time to try to fix the cap situation and also bring in players that fit their scheme before you start judging these guys. But personally, I'm so confident in this regime and confident in Arthur Smith and his ability to call plays that I think that the Falcons easily make the playoffs this season. Looking at our schedule, I definitely think that the Falcons, it's no reason why this Falcons team shouldn't make the playoffs. Even though we're a very young team, I think that they're going to be able to pull this young talent together, band these guys together. And I believe it's enough veteran leadership on this team. Guys like Grady Jarrett, guys like Deion Jones, Matt Ryan, guys like Calvin Ridley, who's now a veteran guy, a part of this team. Hayden Hurst also is a veteran on this team. I really think that it's enough veterans on this roster to help get these guys, get these young guys going and get these guys ready to play. But with that being said, I do want to jump in back into the chat and get a couple of your comments, and then we're going to jump right into the Q&A session of the show. Like I said, I know that tonight is the Eastern Conference Finals. The Atlanta Hawks will be taking on the Milwaukee Bucks, and I'm interested to watch that game tonight. And I know you guys are super hyped, especially the Hawks fans. I'm not a Hawks fan, but I love the underdog, so I'm basically don't have any dog in the fight, but I definitely will be checking out the game tonight. And I know you guys, are super hyped. The Atlanta Hawks fans, I know you guys are hyped, and the city is hyped for this Eastern Conference Finals. So I do want to take you guys' questions, but I want to jump into some of the comments that you guys had as well. Desmond Capel, what's going on, man? He said, I don't have any expectations on the year. I just want them to be competitive. And I completely agree. That's my point as well. I stated, my bold prediction is that this team makes the playoffs in year one under Arthur Smith, because I believe that he's building a winning culture. And I think the players that we have here, we have enough talent with Kyle Pitts, Matt Ryan, Calvin Ridley. To me, we have more talent than he had there in Tennessee. Like now Tennessee with Julio Jones and AJ Brown and Derrick Henry, now they have them a three-headed monster. But prior to a guy like Arthur Smith coming over, I believe the Falcons had more talent. We have more talent than that Tennessee team that he had. Other than the running back, of course, Derrick Henry is a freak of nature. We don't have a Derrick Henry on our team, but I do believe that a guy like Arthur Smith, with all of the weapons that he has at his disposal, Hayden Hurst, Kyle Pitts, Russell Gage, Olamide Zaccheaus, Javion Hawkins, all of these guys that we have on this offensive side of the ball, I definitely think that Arthur Smith is sitting back and licking his chops right now and preparing for this season like a mad scientist, drawing up all type of plays. So I definitely think that, like I said, no pressure in this first season. I just want to see these guys compete as well. I definitely think that that's a great statement there, Desmond. And let's see. Blizz818 says best play callers: Reed, McDaniels, Shanny, McVay. Yeah, I like Frank Reich as well. I didn't mention Frank Reich, but I love Frank Reich as well for the Indianapolis Colts. He was one of those guys that helped the Philadelphia Eagles in 2017 win the Super Bowl. He was the offensive coordinator for Doug Peterson. And we seen last season kind of like a Dan Quinn situation. He lost his offensive coordinator. Doug Peterson lost his offensive coordinator, and Frank Reich, who went over to take the head coach job at the Colts. And next thing you know, Doug Peterson is fired 2 years later. So that just goes to show you it's important not just to have a great head coach, but the whole staff is important. Your offensive coordinators, your assistant coaches, running back coaches, you need all of these guys to be on point, because as a head coach, you're not able to do everything. You have to delegate jobs to these assistants, and these guys, you have to kind of trust these guys to get the job done. So I definitely think that Frank Reich's also an underrated play caller. DeBow, I like the ball as well. There with the Bills, he's another guy that I wanted the Falcons to look at for our head coach position here prior to hiring Arthur Smith. And I also think that Arthur Smith is as well as a part of that list. But I do like this list, Blizz. I definitely think that this is a great list. But in my book, I think Arthur Smith is possibly up there. You can put him anywhere between, I'll say, Frank Reich, DeBall. He's right in between the last three names you said. I'll give Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay the edge at this point over him because they've been head coaches for a little bit now. And this is Arthur Smith's first rodeo. But guys like Frank Reich, I believe last year was his first year with the Colts, and DeBall was a guy with the Bills who's only an offensive coordinator. He's not a head coach yet. So I definitely agree with the list. I like your list. Let's see here. Sean Jones says, if Tom Brady can play under a new system his first year, then the Falcons should be able to do it. Lord help us with Matt Ryan's driving the bus. Hey, look, Sean, I completely agree, but Tom Brady, you gotta understand, Tom Brady there with the Bucs was able to basically kind of control everything. Like he was able to tell them, bring in a guy like Antonio Brown, who I'm familiar with, bring in Rob Gronkowski. Matt Ryan, he hasn't been given that type of pull or authority where he's able to just recruit players whenever he wants. So I completely I agree with you when saying Tom Brady was able to go to a new team and win his first season. But also you got to look at the Bucs defense was a top 10 defense. And then you look at, he had a great offensive minded head coach. If you look at AB there with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Bruce Arians, he's a guy who's won Super Bowls. He's another guy that's really underrated when it comes to play calling. He's been a play caller for a very long time, been in the NFL for over 20 years. And I talked about him in my last show. He's coached the Arizona Cardinals the year that he coached Carson Palmer when they got to the NFC Championship game a couple years ago. He coached Ben Roethlisberger and won Super Bowls with the Steelers. And then he also coached with the Colts as well. He was the offensive coordinator under Chuck Pagano a couple years ago. So I definitely understand what you're saying, Sean, but I think Tom Brady gets more credit than he deserves. I really think that he's always had great coaches. Matt Ryan has had to deal with guys like Dirk Cutter and, Steve Sarkisian, who had no NFL experience as far as being an offensive coordinator coming in from the college ranks. So Matt Ryan hasn't had, the Bill Belichick's, even as a head coach. He's dealt with guys like Mike Smith, who was a first-time head coach, Dan Quinn, who was a first-time head coach. So I really think that we kind of need to cut Matt Ryan some slack. I know you're always on Matt Ryan's neck, but we got to cut Matt Ryan some slack when it comes to that. As far as coaching, it's no comparison. Like Tom Brady has arguably had the greatest coach of all time coaching him for his 20-year career. He's only had one season without Bill Belichick, who's one of the greatest defensive minds of all time and one of the great head coaches of all time. Tony Wright says Kyle Pitts is going to have an outstanding year because he won't be under any pressure because he has a ton of help around him. I completely agree with this as well, and I like this. I like this comment, Tony. I definitely agree with you. I think guys like Calvin Ridley, guys like Hayden Hurst, he has a lot of guys he can learn from. Guys like Russell Gage, who did a good job of developing. I think we've did a great job as far as our specialty players, like the wide receivers. These guys have done a great job of developing our wide receivers. Like Russell Gage has really developed into a great route runner. Calvin Ridley, working with Julio Jones, have turned into one of the best route runners in the game as well. Hayden Hurst is one of those guys that's going to be able to help a guy like Kyle Pitts as well. So I definitely agree with you. Kyle Pitts really doesn't have any pressure. He basically is playing with house money because Hayden Hurst is a guy who is really a starter. If we keep it a buck or keep it 100, Like Hayden Hurst is a starting tight end in the game. We're just possibly going to see a lot of double tight end sets. But both of those guys, of course, Kyle Pitts is a starter, and of course Hayden Hurst is a starter. So I really agree with you there. He doesn't have he's not going to have a lot of pressure on him to come in the first year and get like 1,000 yards or something like that. He's going to have time to develop, just like we gave Calvin Ridley that time, just like we gave guys like Russell Gage, Olamide Zaccheaus, Christian Blake. These guys have been just in the, waiting in the wings, developing. So because you have those great guys like Calvin Ridley, when we had Julio Jones, you take the pressure off of guys like Kyle Pitts coming right in. He's not going to have a ton of pressure on him. And then he has a guy like Matt Ryan, who's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, throwing him the football, who's going to be able to tell him where the soft spots in the zones are. Matt Ryan's going to tell you what he wants. Matt Ryan is one of those guys who's a great communicator. So he's going to be, one of those guys that's going to really be able to help a guy like Kyle Pitts. And that's another reason why I didn't want a rookie quarterback here, because rookie quarterbacks, they don't understand the game fully yet, as far as the NFL, the speed of the NFL game, being able to understand what defenses in the NFL are trying to do to you other than college. A lot of the college now is real gimmicky offenses where, you're looking to the sideline and they're showing you signals and signs and things of that nature. A lot of these guys are not even under center anymore when it comes to college. A lot of these guys, they're not even used to the nuances of the snap count, being able to hard count and things of that nature. A lot of it is silent. In the college, a lot of it is silent cadence. It's not even, hut 1, hut 2, Omaha. It's not none of that. It's just look to the sideline, and they'll basically show you a sign, and you basically, most of the colleges, they're showing you 2 different plays, and they're kind of telling you once the defense, where in the NFL, you basically have either one of those wristbands that has a ton of plays on it, or you have the coach in your ear telling you, in your helmet, telling you what play to call. But you have to understand everything in the NFL. So it's a lot harder than the college game. So I definitely think that's definitely something, definitely a reason why I didn't want to have like a guy like Justin Fields here over a Matt Ryan, who's been in the NFL, is a Hall of Fame player, and understands what defenses and what defensive coordinators are trying to do. But let's see here. Jamari Williams, what's going on, man? He says, Jew, who was the guy that you wanted to be our head coach before Arthur Smith? I was one of those guys that was an Eric Bieniemy fan. He's the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs. They say he's a great disciplinarian, one of those guys who don't play any games, kind of like an Arthur Smith, holds guys accountable. And I like Eric Bieniemy because he's a guy who's worked with great talent, and he's a guy that has a Super Bowl ring. So he would have been somebody that can come into our locker room and say, I know what it takes to win a Super Bowl. To me, that's invaluable. Like, that's priceless. To have a coach that can come in and that's been to the mountaintop. Like, it's not a lot of teams that can say they have a Super Bowl winning head coach. So I definitely think that a guy like Eric Bieniemy would have been able to come in if we would have still had a guy like Julio Jones, but even guys like Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, he would have been able to come in our locker room and say, I've coached, a Pat Mahomes. I've coached Travis Kelce, who's arguably the best tight end in the game. I've coached the cheetah, Tyreek Hill, and he'll be able to tell you, I've done it at the highest level, and I know what it takes to get, to the mountaintop and win it all. So I really think that Eric Bieniemy would have been able to, bring that experience to our Atlanta Falcons squad. And he was coming over from an explosive offense, and I thought he would have been able to bring over some of those schemes that Andy Reid runs, that he's learned from Andy Reid. I thought he would be able to bring over some of those schemes and things of that nature. But other than Eric Bieniemy, the coach for the Bills, the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, I like what he did last season. He was another coach that I had on my coaching tree or coaching list of guys that I wanted the Falcons to look at hiring. Rex Ryan was another guy that was on my list as well, but he was lower on my list because I really wanted the Falcons to go after an offensive-minded coach. And the reason I say that I wanted an offensive-minded coach is not because I don't believe in defensive-minded head coaches. I just wanted the Falcons to go against the grain and do something different because all Matt Ryan has had all his career is defensive minded head coaches. So I wanted Matt Ryan to finally have the luxury of having a great play caller and having the luxury of not having to worry about his offensive coordinator only being there one season and then being hired by another team. But that was a great question, Jabari. Let's see here. And you guys keep those questions coming. I'm gonna try to get to a lot of you guys' questions here. Like I said, I'm definitely gonna end it before 8:30, but I'm gonna take a couple more questions here. Let's see. The real Terrence R says Arthur Smith is going to prove his doubters wrong, and we will be ready to go. Hey, I completely agree. I expect this Falcons team, and this is a great comment. I expect this Falcons team to get off to a great start, a fast start. I really think that this team is going to jump out. That first game against the Eagles, I believe it's a home game for our Atlanta Falcons. I really expect us to put big numbers up against the Eagles. The Eagles are a team last year who doesn't have a good secondary, and they do have a good defensive line. They've always had a great defensive line, but their second and third levels, they struggle. They don't have good linebackers, and they don't have a good secondary. They're really young in their secondary, and they're really young on their second level at that linebacker position. So I really think that first game of the season, I really think that Kyle Pitts, Hayden Hurst are going to have big games. And I expect us to establish that run against guys like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. I expect us to first start off the game hammering that ball, giving that ball to Mike Davis, giving that ball to Quadri Olison, softening up that defense. And then I expect Arthur Smith to hit him over the top, up the seams with guys like Hayden Hurst, guys like Kyle Pitts, who's a mismatch nightmare, and guys like Calvin Ridley. I don't expect them to be able to cover our guys one-on-one. Calvin Ridley is a nightmare. Guys like Russell Gage, who like I stated earlier in the show, has developed into one of the better route runners in the game in that slot or outside role. I really think that they're going to have their hands full, meaning the Eagles in that first game. I really think that we're going to wreak havoc against them. And I really think that Arthur Smith, like you said, is going to prove a lot of the doubters and haters wrong. All of these people that are saying that the Falcons are not going to win more than 7 games or 6 games, I really think that this is going to be a year just like 2016, when a lot of people thought the Falcons weren't going to be able to, do much of anything in 2016. And they bounced back and shocked everybody. After Dan Quinn's first season in 2015, going 8-8, we bounced back, and I believe we went 11-5 the year we went to the Super Bowl. So I really think that Arthur Smith is going to shock a lot of people. Let's see here. And this is another question by Jamari. He says, Jew, how do you think Cordell Patterson will be using the offense? I think Cordell Patterson is a guy you're going to see everywhere. Arthur Smith is a guy who's very creative. You could see Cordell Patterson running the Wildcat. You can see Cordell Patterson in the special teams, whether it's punt return, kickoff return. You're going to be able to see him in the backfield, catching passes out of the backfield. And then he also is a guy who can line up as a traditional wide receiver, because originally Cordell Patterson was drafted out of Tennessee to be a wide receiver. So Cordell Patterson is a football player. He's a Swiss Army knife. You can pretty much use him to do anything on a football field other than play defense. So I think Cordell Patterson is one of those explosive weapons that I was talking about, that he has a lot of tools in his toolkit, meaning Arthur Smith, a lot of arrows that he can put in his bow and just, let him fly. So I really think that teams are going to really, really not know what we're doing. Like, they're going to be confused. I think teams are not going to know how to slow down our Atlanta Falcons, because it's going to be weapons coming in and out of the game in different formations. They're not going to know what to expect from this team, especially now that Julio Jones is gone. They're not going to know who to cover. They're not going to know if we're going for Calvin Ridley on certain plays. They're not going to know if Hayden Hurst. And I feel like every single game is possibly going to be something different, because I really think that Arthur Smith is going to be a coach that's going to go after the weakness of the team. So we're going to see from week to week, our offense is going to look different from week to week. Let's see here. And I just want to answer this quick question. Antonio Holloway, what's going on, man? He says, Jew, why haven't we signed Pitts yet? I think Pitts, I'm not too worried about him signing. I think he'll sign in the next probably week or so, or next 2 weeks or so. They're probably just trying to work out the kinks in his deal because Kyle Pitts is a freak of nature. He's not your average rookie. So I'm sure his representation, whoever his agent is possibly asking for certain clauses and things of that nature, and certain guaranteed money and certain guarantees. Possibly also looking at him possibly having some incentives where if he catches so many passes or catches so many touchdowns, he gets a bonus or something like that. So, he's our number one pick. He's going to be the highest player paid as far as our rookies go. So I wasn't surprised to see he's one of the last guys that hasn't signed as far as the rookie class, because he was drafted 4th overall. So he's going to get a hefty contract. And they're probably just working out the ins and outs of that deal. I'm not worried as far as is he going to actually sign or is he going to sit out training camp or something like that. I'm not too worried about that. One thing I like about Kyle Pitts, and this was something that both Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith talked about, is Kyle Pitts is one of those guys that was very mature. He reminds me a lot of Julio Jones when it comes to he doesn't talk a whole lot. He's a guy that does his job, goes home. You're not going to see him on social media doing a whole bunch. You're not going to see him, running his mouth a whole lot. He seems like he's one of those guys that's about his business, and it seems like he's a very humble guy. So I'm not too worried about Kyle Pitts. I expect him to sign pretty soon, but I wouldn't be worried about a guy like Kyle Pitts. They're going to get the deal done, especially now that we've fixed the kinks as far as it goes with Julio Jones being gone and us getting the Titans to take on his full contract. We really have a lot of money to blow at this point. We have money that we can actually, pay the full draft class. So they have the money. The issue isn't the money. It's possibly just the ins and outs of the deal. Let's see here. And Joseph Thornton, what's going on, man? He says, what game you looking forward to next season, Jew? The game that I'm looking forward to is the Buccaneers. Week 2. I was thinking about going to that game. Me and my wife were thinking about going to that game because I live in Orlando and their stadium is like maybe an hour 20 minutes from my house. And I was thinking about going to that game week 2. And that game is in Tampa. And the reason I'm most excited about the Buccaneers game week 2 and both Buccaneers games this season, because they're a division rival. And also I believe that they're the team to beat, because they're the team that won the Super Bowl and they're right in our division. They didn't win the NFC South last year. The Saints actually won the division, but I believe the Bucs at this point, with Drew Brees retiring, the Bucs are the team to beat in our division. So if we can beat the Buccaneers, at least split with the Buccaneers, that gives us a chance to win the division. But if we sweep the Buccaneers, we possibly could win every game in the division, meaning we can go 6-0 in the division, because the Panthers are a team that's still young and up and coming. And then the Saints are a team that's trying to figure things out when it comes to who their quarterback's going to be, whether it's Taysom Hill or whether it's Jameis Winston. And they're trying to develop, both the Panthers and the Buccaneers are trying to develop a new identity. Like Drew Brees has been the identity, that passing game, and Drew Brees have been the identity of the Saints for the last decade plus. And then as far as the Carolina Panthers go, since they lost Cam Newton last year, he's pretty much been their identity as far as running the football, playing tough defense and running the football, whether it was the quarterback, on those quarterback powers, or whether it was running the ball with Christian McCaffrey. So those teams are still trying to figure out who they are. I think that the Falcons and the Buccaneers right now are the cream of the crop of the division, but the Buccaneers is the game that I'm most looking forward to, because I think it's going to be a good litmus test week 2 to really see if this Falcons team, how good they possibly can be. Week 2 is going to really show us. I don't think that the game against the Eagles is going to really show a whole lot, because the Eagles are a team with a quarterback who's only played or started 4 games in Jalen Hurts. So I don't know how much you can really learn in that game, but the game against the Bucs, because they're the defending champs, that's going to be a game that we can learn a lot. But let's see. But that was a great question. Let's see here, and I want to get into some more of you guys' questions. Let's see. Michael Walker, what's going on, man? He says how you like the depth of the team. I believe this the best depth in like 10 years. I don't know if it's been that long since we had good depth, because I think in 2016 we had great depth as well. In 2017 we had pretty good depth. But I do think that this is one of the better teams when it comes to depth, because we have a lot of young players. And I think we got a lot of guys that are like on 1-year deals. I feel like the last, I'll say maybe 4 years when Dan Quinn was here, the last couple years in I'll say from 2018, 2019, and 2020, I think that our depth wasn't the best. But I really think that that was the fault of Thomas Dimitroff and Dan Quinn. I think they did a bad job of cutting down the 53-man roster. Like if you go and look at us, the way that we cut down the 53-man roster, we kept like 4 or 5 running backs last year, which I don't know why we did that. And we could have kept more defensive linemen, more offensive linemen, and more secondary players. I think we did a poor job of cutting the team down, because we didn't even use guys like Quadra Olson. We really didn't use Ito Smith until late in the season. And guys like Brian Hill, those guys are only used sparingly. So I really think that we had a lot of guys taking space on the roster where we could have had more depth at other positions, like linebacker, like defensive line. Defensive line was a position that we were like struggling at, where we could have brought in another nose tackle. Another nose tackle. We could have brought in a guy to play the edge. Once we lost Pat McKinley, I really feel like we didn't do a good job of bringing in another guy that can come in and basically fill in. We had guys like Steven Means and Jacob Tuioti Mariner. Those were pretty much the only guys that we actually played. And then we sparingly played John Kaminsky. We sparingly played Marlon Davison. So I definitely think that this is one of the better teams when it comes to depth, because we brought in guys that fit the scheme. Like I think that was another problem that we had with Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitroff with that power struggle, where I don't think that we had guys that fit Dan Quinn's scheme to the best of their abilities. I really think that Dan Quinn wanted a guy like Dontari Poe. He wanted guys like Rashid Hageman, and Thomas Dimitroff, for whatever reason, wanted to go out and draft all of those smaller guys. He didn't want to go out and draft or bring in defensive linemen. He wanted to draft offensive players for whatever reason and pay offensive players instead of, building the trenches and building that depth. But I do think that this team, if you look at pretty much every position, the defensive line is loaded. The linebacker position is loaded. The secondary is loaded with guys, whether you're looking at the safety position, guys like Richie Grant, Deron Harmon we brought in, the guy we brought in from the Raiders, Eric, I can't think of his last name right now, but we brought him in. I mean, we got a ton of guys. Jalen Hawkins is another guy that we have at safety, and now they moved Isaiah Oliver. He's going to play a little bit of that safety role, but we have like 4 or 5 safeties, and then we have a ton of cornerbacks. You got AJ Terrell, you got Kendall Sheffield, Isaiah Oliver is a guy that's going to play that corner position. You got Darren Hall that we brought in out of the draft. You have Avery Williams that we drafted. So you got depth at all positions. So I definitely think that that we have a ton of guys here. Let's see here. There we go. He said Eric Harris. Thank you, Devon. Yes, his name wasn't coming to me. Eric Harris. He's another guy that plays that safety role. So yeah, I mean, we have a ton of guys that a ton of depth on this team, ton of young guys, and that we brung in a decent number of veterans as well on 1-year deals. So we're loaded. Like it's going to be competition at every position, and that's the reason I'm so hyped about training camp, because I really think that it's going to be very, very competitive, more competitive than we've ever seen when a guy like Dan Quinn was here, where guys were pretty much given, positions and given jobs, and they really didn't have to compete. Like we've seen guys like Tat McKinley basically didn't have to compete, just did a bunch of talking on social media, but really didn't back it up and didn't have to compete against anybody for that starting role last year. And we basically were dependent on him, even though he was battling injuries pretty much the whole time. We were basically dependent on him to be the guy that was going to get us, around 6 to 10 sacks, which of course he didn't do that. But that's a problem when you don't have the depth, when you're counting on just one or two guys to get you, to be the whole pass rush for a whole team. So I definitely think we've done a great job of filling out this roster. Let's see here. Do you think Fowler will have a dominant season? I like this question right here. This is a great question because Dante Fowler is my guy. Dante Fowler is a guy that I love. I love the number 56. It reminds me of Lawrence Taylor. And pretty much everybody that put on that 56 jersey has been fan favorites for me over the last couple years, over the last decade. Sean Weatherspoon, I have one of his jerseys. He's one of my favorite linebackers of all time for our Atlanta Falcons. The great Keith Brooking, he wore that number 56. But Dante Fowler is definitely a guy that I think is going to have a big season. I think Dante Fowler last year didn't have the running mates. Him and Grady Jarrett didn't have the running mates to help those guys in the pass rush. I think Dante Fowler was one of those guys we were just hoping to be the hero, kind of like Tat McKinley. We were counting on just Dante Fowler and Tat McKinley to be the whole pass rush, and it came back to bite us. Dante Fowler did say he was battling injury all last season. He had an ankle injury coming into the season, coming out of training camp, and he never was able to get healthy. Sometimes ankle injuries and ankle sprains and things of that nature linger. You can look at a guy like Michael Thomas that plays for the Saints, who had 0 catches in the playoffs. He was a guy that was battling a high ankle sprain all season. And you've seen in his game where his game took a little bit of a dip as far as his stats. So I definitely think Dante Fowler is going to have a big year. I think Dante Fowler has all of the tools to be a great pass rusher. And I think him working with the defensive lines coach who we brought over, the outside linebackers coach, he has worked with some great pass rushers. He's worked with guys like Robert Mathis, who was a partner or on the other side of a guy like Dwight Freeney. He's coached guys like Terrell Suggs. So I definitely think once he gets his hand on a guy like Dante Fowler, gets in that outside linebacker room with him and works with him on the field, works on his hand placement and things of that nature when it comes to rushing the passer. And also Dean Pease with his exotic blitz coverages and blitz schemes, those zone blitz schemes and things of that nature. I think a guy like Dante Fowler is going to line up somewhere everywhere. Like he's not going to just line up outside, but I can see Dante Fowler standing up like a regular linebacker where he might knife in, or where you might see us playing some games on the defensive line where guys are moving around on the defensive line. I can really see Dean Pease doing a lot of things to free up a guy like Dante Fowler. And I really expect Dante Fowler to eat this year. I'll say Dante Fowler gets anywhere between 8 to 10 sacks this season for Dante Fowler, depending on how many snaps he gets, because I'm not too sure if they're going to play it like we kind of played it in 2016, where Dante Fowler is going to be line shifts where the guys are coming off the field 5 at a time, or if we're going to see guys only blitzing, on the field in certain scenarios. Depending on how many snaps Dante Fowler gets, I see him getting anywhere between 8 to 10 sacks. But I told you guys, I don't expect one player on this team to get 15, 20 sacks. I really think it's going to be strength in numbers. You're going to see Barkevious Mingo. You're going to see Marlon Davidson. You're going to see Grady Jarrett. You're going to see Michael Walker, Afoye Aluakon, Deion Jones. I think all of these guys are going to get in the mix as far as getting after the passer. But I expect Dante Fowler definitely to have a big season. Definitely a better season than he had last year, because Dante Fowler is in a contract year, and for every sack he gets paid. Like he has an incentive in his contract where for every sack he gets more money. So I really expect him to try to get as much bonus money as he possibly can to squeeze out of that contract, because Dante Fowler is a guy who took a pay cut to come back to the Falcons. I really expect him to play with his hair on fire and to play angry. And I really think that he's going to bounce back from last year's disappointment. And I seen my brother in the chat. What's going on, man? What's going on, VA? That's my brother Javen, my younger brother. Shout out to you, bro. I appreciate you tuning in tonight. Mr. Motivator, man, what's going on, man? I really appreciate you always tuning in. This is one of Atlanta Falcons' biggest supporters and one of Jew Talk Sports' biggest supporters. He's always leaving comments and questions, so I really appreciate you, man. Let's see here. And Mad Mike says, thank everyone for the support. Yeah, we really appreciate you guys. Like I said, if you haven't already hit that like button and subscribe button, please hit that like button and subscribe button. We really appreciate each and every one of you guys for continuing to tune in to us. We're trying to give you guys as much content as possible. We give you guys the stats, the facts, and the truth, as I always state. But we love you guys, man. We appreciate Atlanta Falcons Nation, you guys, helping us get to 2,000. AFN is on a quest for 2,000. Also, Jew Talk Sports, I'm on my way to 2,000 as well. I'm at about 1,200, I believe, right now. But I am trying to hit that 2,000 mark before the season kicks off. So we have about maybe 2 months to get AFN, Jew Talk Sports to 2,000. K Styles is on his way to 1,000. So you guys definitely go over to Just K Styles, help him get to 1,000. He's trying to get monetized. So we really appreciate each and every one of you guys for continuing to tune in and continue to always give us those positive questions and the positive vibes here at Atlanta Falcons Nation. But I'm not going to be up here too much longer because the game will be kicking off in a little bit. So I'll probably take about 3 more questions and then I'm going to get off here. Let's see here. Tony Wright, let's read this question here because I like when people disagree sometimes. He says, I disagree with you, Jew. As far as Carolina goes, their front 7 on defense is good. And their 2 corners, Dante Jackson, out of LSU, first round, J.C. Horn. I forgot about J.C. Horn, and I completely agree with you. Now, when it comes to Dante Jackson, I think Dante Jackson's burnt toast. I'm not a big Dante Jackson fan. He is fast, but Dante Jackson doesn't have good awareness. He doesn't do a good job at turning his head around for the football, and he's a guy that falls down a lot. If you guys remember in the game against the Carolina Panthers and the Falcons in that Thursday night game, basically Julio Jones cooked them. Julio Jones was cooking them. Calvin Ridley was cooking them, and they really don't scare me. I do think that Carolina's defense is up and coming. You can't sneeze at them because to me, they're building their team the right way from front to back. You know, they have my Auburn alum, the big guy that I wanted at that nose position, Derek Brown. And they have up and coming players. I think Brian Burns is one of the better defensive ends in the game or outside linebackers in the game. I definitely think that he's a guy that could be a Pro Bowler really soon. And I think they're doing a solid job there in Carolina. Don't get me wrong. J.C. Horn is a dog. He's a guy that I wanted for our Atlanta Falcons. So I definitely think they're doing a good job, but I don't fear a guy like Dante Jackson. I don't think that Dante Jackson is a good corner. I think he's average. But I do think that J.C. Horn has a chance, even though J.C. Horn is also a rookie. So we don't really know what to expect out of those guys. And that's the reason I say that they're building. But I do agree with you there, Tony, right? I mean, their front 7 is solid, but I think they're a really young team, just like the Falcons on that back end, but they're even younger than we are. Like, they're really, really young. And to me, they really don't have a leader on that defensive side of the ball. They have a lot of young guys. Like, they're trying to develop that leader. Since they lost Luke Kuechly and since they lost Thomas Davis, they do have a guy in Shaq Thompson that's trying to take over that role of Luke Kuechly. But those are huge shoes to fill because Luke Kuechly is a all-time great linebacker, all-time defensive player, Hall of Fame worthy, first ballot Hall of Fame worthy type player at linebacker. So I definitely think that Carolina's up and coming, but I'm not worried about them this season. It'll really shock me if they beat us again this season. But I'll take a few more questions. And I appreciate that, Devon. He says, great show, Jew. Hey, I appreciate it. I do it for you guys, man. I do it for the love of our Atlanta Falcons, and I definitely do it for you guys for always tuning in and giving us that support here at Atlanta Falcons Nation. Like I said, if you haven't hit that like button, please hit that like button for your boy on this video. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, hit that subscribe button. And like I said, let a friend or family member know, about the channel, about AFN, especially if they're an Atlanta Falcons fan. But even if they're not an Atlanta Falcons fan, we have tons of, fans that are fans of other teams, but they tune in to our shows, they subscribe, they comment, leave questions and things of that nature. But I definitely appreciate you guys. Let's see here. I'm gonna scroll up a little bit because maybe I missed a question here. Let's see. Antonio Holloway, he says, what training camp battles you looking forward to the most, Jew? I would say it's on the offensive line. The offensive line, I think that Matt Hennessy is gonna win between him and Drew Dahlman, but I'm interested to see Jalen Mayfield and that battle at the left guard, whether it's gonna be Jalen Mayfield. Matt Gano actually got injured, so he's possibly scratched at that position. But I'm definitely interested to see the other guys that'll be competing against Jalen Mayfield for that position. There's a ton of guys that we have on the offensive line that can compete for that left guard position and that center position. I'm really interested to see that. I'm interested also to see the corner position. Like, a lot of people are not talking about the outside corner, the second corner position. I think personally, Fabian Monroe to me has the edge right now because of his size and because of his speed and things of that nature and his attributes. But I think Kendall Sheffield is a guy who's a dark horse. He can compete for that outside position. I also think Darren Hall is a sleeper, and we have guys that can compete for that second role. So we all know that AJ Terrell is the dog, the number one corner, and I don't think anybody's beating him out for the number one corner spot. But that second corner position, personally, I think right now Fabian Monroe has the edge coming over from Washington. But I think guys like Darren Hall, who's a ball hawk, could come in and compete. I believe our defensive backs coach, Hulk is his last name, Coach Hulk. His brother actually coached Darren Hall. So he kind of could be one of those guys that they're looking at that can possibly be that outside corner or possibly be that nickel corner because they have familiarity with him. Coach Hope's brother used to coach him at San Diego State. So we'll see. It's a lot of positions. The safety position is another one that I think could get really interesting because we have the veteran guys like Deron Harmon and Eric Harris that'll be competing with the young bucks. Jalen Hawkins, back there in that safety role. Isaiah Oliver now has thrown his hat into the ring. That could possibly be one of those guys that can compete for that position as well. And then, of course, we have the great Richie Grant, who I think is going to be a star in this league. I think he's going to be a Pro Bowler. He's a guy that I wanted out of UCF, and we end up taking him. It was either him or Andre Cisco that I wanted, and the Falcons decided to go with Richie Grant. So I definitely think that Richie Grant, to me, he has the leg up at the free safety position. But Deron Harmon, he has that experience, and Eric Harris has that experience of being a guy with the Las Vegas Raiders that was a captain not only on the defense but on the special team side of things. And also Eric Harris and Richie Grant, those guys were training together prior to him being drafted by the Falcons. So Eric Harris is a guy, as a safety, you got to understand the playbook. You got to understand how to get guys lined up in the correct positions. So I could easily see one of those veteran safeties possibly pushing these young cats for that starting role because they understand Dean Pease defense and they understand the nuances of getting guys lined up and stuff like that. Richie Grant may not be ready to be able to do that Ricardo Allen type role where you're the quarterback kind of on the back end. So we might have to go with Eric Harris or Deron Harmon and then one of the young bucks together to kind of mix and match that. So until those guys get caught up to speed and they get some games under their belt, where they get used to, calling out things and stuff like that and lining guys up correctly. But with that being said, I'm gonna take maybe 2 more questions and then I'm gonna get off of here because it's 8:20 or 8:19. So the game's getting ready to come on in about 10 minutes. So I'll take about 2 more questions here and then I'm gonna get off here. Let's see. And this is Tony Wright. He says, I also believe that D coordinator Dean Pease will turn John Kaminsky hits and knockdowns on quarterbacks from last year into sacks. Your thoughts? I agree. I mean, John Kaminsky is one of those guys that he has all the tools. He has the size, he has the speed, he's able to bend the corner. He just needs to continue to work on his hand placement and things of that nature. He's a little bit raw when it comes to that. But as far as having the size, strength, and the ability, I think that Kaminsky could definitely be the next Patrick Kearney for our team, the next Jared Allen. That's who he puts me in the mind of. And I definitely could see him balling out under Dean Pease. Dean Pease is one of the greatest defensive coaches of all time. And I expect him to get the best out of every single player on this defense. And then I'm going to take another question. Let's see. And this will be the last question of the night. And let's see here. And I'll take this question from Devon. He says, your thoughts on Oliver moving to safety? I like this move. And I talked a little bit about this, I believe, on Kicking It with K-Styles maybe a week or two ago. I love this move of moving Isaiah Oliver. I said move him everywhere. Let him still be in the box sometimes as like a that Keanu Neal type role where he's a box safety or box linebacker. Use him in the nickel role because he did a good job at playing nickel for us last year. And then also use him as a safety. I wouldn't put him back there at the single high safety by himself because I don't think he has the range to play the single high safety. And I don't think he has the instincts to me as far as breaking on the football, as far as interceptions and things of that nature. I think that should be a role that Richie Grant, if you're going to play the single high safety. But if you're going to have two high safeties, I definitely think that Isaiah Oliver is a guy great when things are out in front of him. He's great in zone coverage where he just has to run and hit. He's great at tackling in space, kind of like when we had Brian Poole, and he plays the game like a smaller, like a cornerback that plays linebacker. Like he's very physical when it comes to tackling. He's great at wrapping up, and he doesn't miss a lot of tackles. And that's something that you need out of a safety. You need somebody that's a reliable tackler, a guy that's not afraid to tackle tight ends, that's not afraid to come down in the box and, chase down running backs and tackle running backs one-on-one. And that's something that I think he excelled at last season. If you go pull up the tape on Isaiah Oliver last season, he did a great job at tackling guys in one-on-one situations. He was one of the best one-on-one tacklers. And I think that that's something that he's going to continue to excel at. And I think with a guy like Dean Pease working with him, I think his ball skills will improve as far as his awareness of being able to know where the football is and him being able to break on footballs and things of that nature as far as interceptions. But I do think that Isaiah Oliver needs to work on catching the ball, work on his hands, get on the jug machine and work on catching the football because he had a couple instances last year. One I vividly remember was against the Bears last year where he dropped, could have been a game clinching interception for us. It would have been a momentum breaker against the Bears in that game. And I believe him and Deion Jones were right in the same vicinity breaking on the football, and Isaiah Oliver ended up dropping the interception. But I definitely think that he has the ability to be a playmaker for this team. But with that being said, this being your boy Jew, I'm definitely going to go ahead and get ready to get off here. Like I said, the Eastern Conference playoff game is getting ready to kick off. I really appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. Definitely continue to like, share, subscribe if you haven't already to Atlanta Falcons Nation, Jew Talk Sports. I'm here every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. I love you guys. We appreciate you guys, everything that you guys do for the channel, whether it's just a simple like, share, subscribe, the super chats, the Mad Mike memberships and things of that nature that you guys do, the super stickers, whatever you guys do. We appreciate the cash apps and everything that you guys do. We appreciate each and every one of you guys. But with that being said, this being your boy Jew, I'll have another episode of What's the Word Dirty Bird coming for you guys next Wednesday. But as always, Falcons Nation, rise up. And as always, peace. Y'all have a great evening.